A lot of people feel like they've already found the perfect retirement spot, like they've figured it out. But most actually get it wrong. They overpay, deal with stress they didn't see coming, and later there's this quiet regret that sets in. And meanwhile, these lesser-known towns in the Pacific Northwest are just sitting there, not hyped, quietly offering a better life. And what's interesting is, you're probably not ready for what comes next. Because when we looked at housing costs, healthcare access, and real living data across Pacific Northwest towns, not surface level, but the actual numbers, what showed up was kind of surprising. And honestly, the first town alone proves it right away. Number 10, Dallas, Oregon. Dallas is one of those places people tend to overlook. And honestly, that's kind of the reason it works so well for retirement. At first, it feels simple, almost a little too quiet. But then you start to notice that calm is hiding something rare. There's a real sense of balance. Home prices sit around $400,000, which makes it way more attainable compared to a lot of Oregon towns that get all the attention. And what really stands out, is the community itself. A large portion of residents are already 65 and older, and that quietly shapes everything, from the services to the rhythm of daily life. The Dallas Area Senior Center is active and reliable, and it's built around connection, not just programs. You walk through Dallas City Park and it just feels natural, not staged. Mature trees, open space, and people moving at a pace that doesn't rush you. Nearby, the Delbert Hunter Arboretum brings in these peaceful trails, while Basket Slough National Wildlife Refuge opens up into wide valley views that somehow make even ordinary days feel bigger. Even the Fox Theater and Polk County Museum give the town character without trying too hard. Life here is steady, errands are easy, traffic behaves, and nothing feels like a competition. The trade-off is clear, though. Dallas isn't flashy. There's no big city buzz, no constant entertainment. But that's exactly why it stays affordable while others don't. People here aren't chasing excitement, they're protecting their peace. And the next town shifts that balance in a way you probably didn't expect. Number 9, Ellensburg, Washington. Ellensburg kind of feels like a town that never really tried to impress anyone, and somehow that ends up being exactly why it works. At first glance, it looks simple. Open land, quiet streets, nothing flashy. But then you start noticing the details, and they begin to matter. Home prices sit around $430,000, which is noticeably lower than a lot of Washington towns, while still giving you real space and comfort. And what stands out is how practical everything feels. KVH Hospital is right in town, so healthcare is close, not something you have to drive far for when it actually matters. You walk through Irene Reinhardt Riverfront Park, and the Yakima River just moves calmly beside you, and it turns an ordinary day into something peaceful without trying. Just outside town, Olmsted Place State Park opens up into these wide valley views, with preserved farm buildings that make the whole area feel grounded and real. The Clymer Museum of Art adds culture, while the Ellensburg Rodeo gives the town a pulse without it ever feeling overwhelming. Life here is straightforward. Roads make sense, errands stay quick, and the pace never really rushes you. The trade-off is clear, though. It's not polished or trendy. Summers get warm, winters feel real, and the landscape kind of keeps everything honest. And honestly, that honesty is what keeps it affordable. And the next town changes the scenery completely. Number 8, Cottage Grove, Oregon. Cottage Grove feels like one of those places that isn't trying to compete with anything, and somehow, Yeah, that's exactly why it works. At first, it just comes across as a quiet Oregon town with a slower rhythm, maybe even a little too calm. But then the numbers start to catch your attention, and you kind of pause on that. Home prices sit around $385,000, which makes it one of the more attainable spots in the region, especially when nearby areas start climbing fast, like really fast. And what really stands out is how much character just sort of shows up in everyday life. Not in a forced way, just there. The Roe River Trail runs right through the area with paved paths, lake views, and access to historic covered bridges. And suddenly, a simple walk turns into something memorable, like more than you expected. That same identity carries into the Covered Bridges Scenic Bikeway, giving the town a theme that actually feels real, not staged or overly curated. Dorena Lake sits just outside town, offering calm water and these open views that feel like a reset when you need it, like a real reset. Back in town, the cottage theater and historic murals add just enough culture to keep things interesting without overdoing it. Daily life moves steadily, not slow in a frustrating way, just steady without feeling empty. The trade-off is clear, though. This isn't a high-energy place. There's no big city buzz, no constant activity, none of that. And yet, that's exactly why it stays affordable. And the next town brings something unexpected from California. Number 7. Fortuna, California. Fortuna is one of those places that kind of makes you pause for a second, because it just doesn't behave like the rest of California, and that contrast really stands out. Most people expect high prices and this constant pressure, but this town quietly moves in the opposite direction, almost like it's doing its own thing. Home prices sit around $400,000, which, honestly, feels surprisingly attainable for California, like you don't expect that number there. And what makes it even more compelling is that affordability doesn't mean you're giving anything up. Not really. Providence Redwood Memorial Hospital is right in town, so healthcare is reliable and close. No long drives when it actually matters. And then the setting kind of shifts everything around you. Roner Park runs through Fortuna with these towering redwood groves, and even a short walk starts to feel immersive and calm, like you slow down without realizing it. Nearby, the Eel River opens things up with space and water views that feel natural, not crowded or overdone. The Fortuna Depot Museum brings in that local history, while the nearby Victorian streets of Ferndale add this unique charm that most towns this size just don't have, like it sneaks up on you. Daily life feels steady and grounded. Errands stay simple, traffic stays light, and nothing really pushes you to rush. The trade-off is clear, though. This isn't that high-energy California lifestyle. Fog rolls in, the pace stays slow, and trends don't really matter here, like at all. And yet, that's exactly why it works. And the next town brings a completely different kind of balance. Number 6. Ukiah, California. Ukiah is one of those towns that kind of quietly pulls off a balance most places just can't seem to get right, and you don't even notice it at first. It sits in Northern California, surrounded by hills and vineyards, but without those overwhelming price tags that usually come with scenery like that, which honestly is a bit unexpected. Home prices land around $485,000, keeping it noticeably below a lot of better-known California markets, while still offering a complete lifestyle. Like nothing really feels missing. And what makes Ukiah stand out is how it blends practicality with character. Not one or the other, but both at the same time. Adventist Health Ukiah Valley is right in town, providing 24-hour emergency care, and that adds real peace of mind, the kind you don't have to think about constantly. Then the setting sort of shifts everything around you. The city of 10,000 Buddhas brings this calm, almost unexpected atmosphere, like it changes the tone of the whole place, while Vichy Springs Resort adds a historic mineral spring experience that's been quietly lasting for generations. The Grace Hudson Museum gives the town a cultural anchor, making daily life feel more connected, a little more rooted. Just outside town, Montgomery Woods State Natural Reserve opens up with towering redwoods and quiet trails that feel untouched, like they've just been left alone in the best way. Life here moves steadily without feeling empty. The trade-off is subtle, though. This isn't a fast-paced place. It leans toward balance over excitement, and you feel that. And yet, that's exactly why it stays livable. And the next town raises the scenery to a completely different level. Number 5. Sandpoint, Idaho. Sandpoint is the kind of place that just looks expensive the second you see it, like right away. And that's exactly why it ends up surprising people. It sits along Lake Pend Oreille with these mountain views that feel almost too perfect, almost staged. So it gives off this high-end impression at first glance. Then the numbers kind of shift the story. Home prices land around $450,000, which keeps it more grounded than a lot of scenic towns across the West, and you don't really expect that. What makes Sandpoint stand out is how it pairs all that beauty with everyday practicality, like it's not just for show. Bonner General Health is right in town, offering 24-hour emergency care, and that adds real peace of mind, the kind you don't have to overthink. The setting does most of the work, honestly. Sandpoint City Beach gives you easy access to calm water, while the Pend Oreille Bay Trail offers this flat, walkable path with wide lake views that just sort of open things up. Schweitzer sits nearby, adding year-round mountain scenery and activity, but without overwhelming the pace, which is important. In town, the Pineda Theater and Evans Brothers Coffee bring in that local feel, and it stays authentic, not overdone. Life here feels balanced. The trade-off is clear, though. It's not trying to be cheap or fast-growing. Winters bring real snow. Seasons feel distinct, and the pace stays steady, like it doesn't rush for anyone. And yet, that's exactly why it works. And the next town adds a completely different kind of culture. Before we get into the next town, take a second to hit subscribe if you want more real, data-backed insights like this, because small details can completely change how your retirement actually feels. And the next place proves that in a way most people don't expect. Number 4. Walla Walla, Washington. Walla Walla is one of those names people kind of laugh at first, like it doesn't sound serious. And then, somewhere along the way, they quietly start looking into it once they realize what it actually offers. It sits in southeastern Washington, surrounded by vineyards and open land, and it gives you that scenery without the heavy price pressure you'd expect. Home prices land around $420,000, which makes it far more approachable than a lot of Pacific Northwest towns with a similar kind of appeal, and that difference really matters. What really stands out, though, is the depth of the community, like there's more going on under the surface. Providence St. Mary Medical Center provides reliable health care right in town, and that adds a level of stability you can actually feel. Pioneer Park has these shaded walking paths and mature landscaping that feel established, not artificial or newly put together. The Fort Walla Walla Museum brings in a full historical campus, while Whitman Mission National Historic Site adds another layer of identity that kind of anchors the place. Downtown feels alive, but not overwhelming, just enough energy, with places like the Marcus Whitman Hotel and Bright's Candies giving it a local personality that sticks. Life here feels balanced, with culture, space, and routine all working together without clashing. The trade-off is clear, though. This is inland living. Summers get warm, and it stays away from that big city energy, like it's not chasing it at all. And yet, that's exactly why it stays livable. And the next town shifts everything toward the coast. Number 3. Astoria, Oregon. Astoria feels like one of those towns that never really needed to prove anything, and that's kind of exactly why it stands out the way it does. It sits right where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean, bringing together water, history, and this quiet confidence that a lot of coastal towns try to create but don't quite land. Home values come in around $460,000, which puts it in a more reasonable range compared to a lot of coastal spots that push way higher just because they can. And what makes Astoria different is how it blends all that scenery into everyday life, like it's just part of the routine. Columbia Memorial Hospital is right in town, offering dependable healthcare access. And that takes away one of the biggest concerns people usually have with smaller coastal areas. Then there's the environment, and this is where it really shifts. The Astoria Riverwalk stretches along the water, giving you these front-row views of ships moving through the Columbia River. And you don't have to plan anything. It's just there. The Astoria Column rises above the town and gives you this panoramic view that kind of reminds you how unique the location actually is. Nearby, Fort Stevens State Park and Sunset Beach open everything up with coastal space that feels expansive instead of crowded, like you can breathe a bit. Downtown stays walkable and full of character, with local shops, art galleries, and historic buildings that feel preserved, not replaced or overdone. Daily life here feels reflective. The pace slows down, but it doesn't feel empty or quiet in a dull way, just steady. The trade-off shows up in the weather and the location. This isn't light drizzle, it's real coastal moisture, and getting to larger cities takes time and some intention. You have to mean it. And yet, that's exactly what keeps Astoria from becoming overrun, while still offering a lifestyle that feels complete. People who choose this town aren't chasing convenience. They're choosing atmosphere, history, and a place that feels grounded without trying too hard. It doesn't push itself forward. It just exists confidently. And the next town takes that coastal idea and adds something far more unexpected. Number 2, Port Townsend, Washington. Port Townsend feels like a town that at some point just decided modern chaos was optional, and then stuck with that decision without looking back. It sits on the northeastern tip of the Olympic Peninsula, surrounded by water on 3 sides, and it carries this coastal atmosphere that feels calm, a little artistic, and quietly confident in itself. Home values here average higher than some others on this list, sitting around $600,000. But what's interesting is how flexible that range can be depending on location and style. Like it's not as fixed as it sounds at first. What really stands out, though, isn't just the setting, it's the personality of the place. Jefferson Healthcare provides local medical access, which adds that layer of practicality that kind of balances out all the scenery. Then the town sort of unfolds in its own way. The historic downtown is filled with preserved Victorian buildings that feel lived in, not staged or polished up for show. while the Port Townsend Farmers Market and the waterfront area bring this steady rhythm of local activity that just keeps things moving without pressure. Fort Worden State Park stretches along the shoreline with open beaches, trails, and historic structures. And somehow, everyday outings start to feel meaningful without you trying to make them that way. The Northwest Maritime Center adds another layer, tying everything back to its maritime roots in a way that actually feels authentic, not forced. Life here moves differently. There's a thoughtful pace where people spend more time creating, reading, or just being present instead of rushing through routines like everywhere else. The trade-off is noticeable, though. Port Townsend isn't trying to be convenient. Getting to larger cities takes planning, the weather can shift quickly, and the town leans heavily into its own unique character, which, isn't going to be for everyone. And yet, that's exactly why it remains what it is. People who choose Port Townsend aren't looking for efficiency. They're looking for atmosphere, culture, and a lifestyle that feels intentional instead of reactive. It doesn't chase attention, it just quietly holds it. And the final town on this list changes everything about what affordable coastal living can look like. Number 1. Coos Bay, Oregon. Coos Bay is one of those places people tend to overlook, and that's exactly why it ends up at the top of this list. It sits along the southern Oregon coast, and it delivers something that almost feels impossible in today's housing market. Coastal living that's still genuinely affordable, like actually affordable. Home values land around $315,000, with rents often sitting near $800, and that alone immediately separates it from most coastal towns where prices just keep escalating. But that's only part of why it works. Bay Area Hospital is right in town, providing reliable healthcare access without long-distance travel, and over time that becomes a much bigger deal than people expect. The setting doesn't try to impress in some polished, curated way. The Pacific Ocean here is raw, loud, constantly moving, and it creates this backdrop that feels real instead of staged. Drives along the Cape Arago Highway open into wide coastal views that feel almost cinematic, like you didn't plan for it, but there it is. Nearby, Shore Acres State Park and Sunset Bay State Park bring in cliffs, gardens, and quiet beaches that rarely feel overcrowded, which, honestly, is getting harder to find. The town itself stays practical. You'll find everyday essentials, local shops, and places like the historic Egyptian theater that add just enough character to keep things interesting without pushing the pace too much. Fishing, boating, even simple coastal walks start to become part of normal life, not something you wait for. The rhythm here is steady. Errands stay quick, traffic rarely turns into a problem, and daily life doesn't feel like this constant calculation of time and cost. The trade-off is clear, and it's very real. This isn't sunshine-driven coastal living. Fog rolls in often, the wind shows up with opinions, and the weather can feel unpredictable if you're expecting postcard conditions, like those perfect ones. The town also leans more blue-collar in nature, so it feels practical rather than polished, functional instead of trendy. And yet that's exactly why it stays accessible while still offering a complete lifestyle. There's no pressure to keep up, no expectation to perform, and no inflated cost just for the idea of being near the ocean. People who choose Coos Bay aren't chasing attention or status. They're choosing space, stability, and a version of coastal living that feels honest, like really honest. It doesn't try to sell you anything. It just gives you a place to breathe, think, and slow down in a way that actually lasts. And if quiet beats chaos, then this might not just be a good option, It might be the one most people wish they had found sooner. The real difference. Here's what most people miss, and it's easy to miss it if you're not really looking. It's not just where you retire, it's how far your money actually stretches once you're there. Like, that part changes everything. Small cost differences don't feel big at first, but they add up, and then they change everything. Everything. Coastal towns bring those views, sure, but they trade off weather and distance, while inland places lean more toward stability and lower pressure, just a different kind of balance. The happiest retirees aren't chasing hype, they're choosing consistency, where daily life just feels easier. And what most people still get wrong might surprise you. Some people retire into noise, higher costs, constant pressure, and they don't always realize it right away. Others end up walking quiet shores in Coos Bay or watching sunsets in Astoria, and everything slows down, like really slows down. Same region, completely different life. The difference isn't luck, it's where you land. So the only question left is, which side are you about to choose?